What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 44 of the Steam Deck Podcast, Flip Screen Games weekly gaming podcast, all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined again by my very good friend and co-host, making his grand return to the show, Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy. I forgot what I said there. Ahoy, ahoy.
You got it. You nailed it. You're right here, buddy.
Yeah, boy.
Man, it's good to have you back, bud. It's been a
It's
while.
it's good to be back. It's fucking hot. I'm sweating for you guys. I've had to turn my fan off to preserve the quality of the content. And let me tell you, it's a sacrifice. I know you've all been crying and calling for me back. I've seen all the comments and I've seen all the messages that everyone's desperate to get me back. So here I am. That's a lie, by the way. I've made all that up. Just in case there's anyone listening
You know,
who
it's
doesn't know
it's
that.
it's true. The folks did want you back. I think it's just every time, right, one of you or Steve goes away, I'm like, I got to take more vacations, right? Because I'm the
Mhm.
one who's here every week showing up for you guys, and I'm not saying you got to appreciate me as much as Steve. I get it. He's the brains of the operation, but
Did we settle on that? That's
so here's what
was
happened, right? So I know we had that
okay.
whole controversy. You and I made a little joke. We made a little joke about Steve.
Yeah.
Some folks didn't take it too. So now what I've taken to doing is every time I introduce him, I call him the Steam Deck community's greatest
Okay, yeah.
mind. So
Yeah,
everybody
yeah, yeah.
knows, I'm putting respect on the name.
Did
Okay.
you did you hear me, give our statement, give our shared statement?
I did. I did.
Okay,
I
good.
appreciated that you were there to take the heat while I was away.
It's tough,
And then of
you know?
course that's why you had to leave for a couple weeks, lay low.
I had to
Now
take some time to reflect and think about things, you know? So when you say something, as fiendish and evil as we did, sometimes you need to take time. You went to Disneyland, and I just did other things, just to get my mind right so I can come back here and give
yeah,
you
like go
guys the
see
content you
Slipknot. That's what you got to
deserve.
do.
Yeah, yeah,
Sometimes you
yeah,
got to get
exactly,
your
that's
mind right.
important. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You build your mind up, you crush it back down to dust, and that's how it works.
So, of course, what better week for the two of us to reunite without Steve than when we've had perhaps the largest update to the Steam client in the entire time I've been on the platform. So,
Yep.
of course, you've got two of the Steam Deck community's finest minds besides Steve here to talk about it. All right. So,
Joint second. That's what everyone's
yeah,
saying.
yeah. Right. With our powers combined, I feel like
Exactly.
we're pretty okay.
Exactly.
So, we got a pretty big update this week to Steam, and not just on Steam Deck, right? It's the Steam client as a whole. Valve released a blog post as well as a short video that kind of broke down a lot of the big. They literally just called it a big update to Steam, right? They got Steam update because I guess it is that significant, right?
That's
There
what it
are
is.
a lot of little cool quality of life changes here that are right there. But to kind of like, let Valve speak for themselves on what exactly they did here, right? In the release video, they said we rebuilt the Steam client on a brand new framework. This makes it easier and faster for us to ship features across desktop, Steam Deck, big picture, and mobile. Along the way, we gave Steam a fresh coat of paint. You'll see new improvements across dialogues, menus, fonts, and more. We're also shipping new features and improvements to existing features. For example, notifications are now richer and more useful. You can now control what you see and where. And I thought this was interesting because in the actual example of this, they kind of showed how you could have different notifications on your mobile device versus on your Steam Deck versus on PC. So pretty interesting, I guess, how you could kind of customize that to how you use Steam on each of those devices, which I think is one of those kinds of features I really love Valve for, where it's a minor thing. I think it's probably a niche thing to a certain segment of the audience that is really actively using Steam on
Mhm.
multiple devices. But if it's something that's going to make people's experience easier, it's worth taking the time to do. And Valve did it. That's cool.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I don't really use notifications at all, to be honest. Or I don't really generally use these things, notifications being the sort of the big thing that I would think I would want across platforms. But like
Sure.
if I'm getting a message in a chat, it's generally not from Steam chat. It's generally going to be like on Discord or in WhatsApp, for example. But yeah, like you say, it's good to have things across the platforms properly.
And I
Especially now
do.
there are more things. Sorry, especially now that we've got the Steam Deck, which is another way to engage with Steam that isn't just your PC.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that like having the foresight to kind of actually work on trying to improve notifications and things like that, I think is an incentive for people to consider using some of the in-game I don't want to say in-game, like I don't know, in platform features of Steam,
Mhm.
right? Like I talked about with my just kind of my own experience on deck, right? When I was really, really into playing multiverses, and I would use the native chat on Steam Deck with my friend Jack whenever we played because it was just so good, and it
Hmm.
was it was easy, right? It was, I think, kind of the promise that they talked about with like the PlayStation DualSense, like it's got a mic built into it and you can just talk right into it and
Yeah.
you don't necessarily need a fancy headset. If you have one, great, it supports it, but if you don't, you can have a good native experience anyway, right? And it
Yeah.
was very cool to be able to just plug in, a standard pair of like Sony earbuds and just use the deck like that, right? And I
Yeah.
think being able to customize notifications if like there are certain types of things that you just don't want to engage with when you're on deck or when you're on mobile,
Hmm.
or whatever, right? Like that's cool. It's all about the ability for you to be in control and for you to have
Yeah.
customization of what your experience is like.
There were some things I did like when my Steam Deck for all of a week and a bit lost all notifications. There were a few things that I was like, "Uh-oh, I'm a bit lost without, some of these things that aren't coming up." So there are uses for it, and I'm glad to see that. But that, if I was the kind of person who didn't care about those things, but I did care about other things, it's good to be able to sort of say, "I want to see this, don't want to see this," as opposed to saying, "I want no notifications, so I never want to know when a screenshot's taken successfully. I never want to know when I get an achievement." All these things that you lose out on just by saying no completely.
Right. And I could totally see why some of those you would definitely not want to be getting on mobile, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
I got this screenshot notification on my deck. I don't need it in three
Yeah, yeah.
places, right? Like something like that.
I think I only
It's
get sale notifications on my phone anyway, I'm pretty sure. But I guess maybe they've changed it. Now you can get these things so that you can maybe just have like a something so you can share it or just something you can have on your mobile so you can see it in a different place.
Yeah, and I could see like setting it up where maybe you only got chat notifications on mobile, right? Like or something like that,
Mhm.
or you only got game invites so that if you're not at your PC and then a friend is like, "Hey, you want to jump on and go do some duos or something like that?" You're like, "Yeah,
Yeah,
sure," and you jump on, right? Like
yeah.
having that ability I think really does it encourages you to use those things that you might not use, right? Like you said, I don't really use the app. Maybe you might find a use case for it now.
Yeah,
That's cool.
exactly.
Definitely cool. But there were some other new features that I thought were very, very interesting and very impressive. So they talked about the addition of a new in-game overlay that
Mhm.
has a bunch of new options and kind of the ability for you to have even greater personalization than was capable before. They talked about how there's like a brand new overview panel that has a improved web browser. So like they showed an example of like a player playing Hollow Knight and then pulling up like a YouTube video to like watch a guide or a tutorial or
Quick
something like
guide,
that.
yeah.
But then they also added a notes feature, which is really cool, where you basically just get a notepad that you can jot down whatever thoughts excuse me, whatever thoughts you have, and it's connected to um, the Steam cloud save function. So like any
Mhm.
client you access the game on, when you pull up that panel, you'll have your notes. So like love the idea of being able to be like, oh, the last time I was playing, what was I doing? Something like that. You can,
Yeah.
have that kind of
I
log for yourself. Really cool.
I take a lot of notes when, like, it's the end of a game and I'm, like, going around finishing things up, right? And for example, I know it's not on Steam, but when I was playing Xenoblade Chronicles, I was like, "Cool, I know I need to do. I've seen this boss; it's too strong for me, but I'll make a note of it for later." Or when playing Elden Ring, for example, I had like a list of things that I'd seen that I
Sure.
wanted to go back to, and like I would write it down on my phone. So having that on directly, not just directly in Steam, but also having that always in the corner if you want it to be like fairly opaque or transparent. Sorry, so you can sort of see these things you want to do on top of your thing, and it sort of keeps you in the experience somewhat. I know some people might say that actually that might take you out of the experience, but it's better than putting up your phone and going right scrolling. You just have like, cool, I found this. Cool, I've done this. Now I'm going to speak quickly as someone who's used Steam for a while. I found the overlay to just be like impenetrable. You bring it up and it's like, wow, here's just like everything at once. And I'm like, where's the bit I need to find? Sometimes it's just like change a setting or where are my screenshots saved or whatever. I'm just like, this is like far too much for me. It's oppressively like busy. So being able to just like turn on the few things that I do want, put them wherever I need them to be, and then also have them if I need them to be. For example, achievements like, cool, I'm going for this achievement. I know I've got to do 100 of this one thing, and the achievements that do keep track of that, and they say you're at 88 out of 100, for example. instead of me having to constantly pull up the menu and look at it, just having that in the bottom corner while I'm playing. Because at that point, I'm if I'm just going around trying to tidy up achievements or whatever, I'm not fully engaged in the story anymore. I'm not, like, doing big things like that. It's just sort of like I'm playing the game to finish it, and having all that
Right.
stuff accessible instantly is I'm to be honest, I'm surprised it's taken this long for it to happen on any system. Because on PlayStation, you still have to press the button for it to bring up that. On PS5, you've got that tracker now. That's still a button press away. Like, having it just overlaid over your game wherever you want it to be, because you can move it depending on the game. If there's a bit of the game UI that isn't very important to you, or if there's just a space in the UI that you think you could put, like, a little something in, like a notes or a tracker, great, pop it down there. That's a really handy feature. I wonder if these things are I know that the notes are stored on the cloud, but I wonder if I pick up a game on PC, I put the things where I want them to, and then on the Steam Deck, is that gonna mirror across? Is the notes gonna be exactly where I want the notes to be? And
That'll
it's a
be
smaller screen, so
interesting.
are they gonna be the
Yeah.
same size? Like, how does that work? I guess I can test that now because it is out. Is it out? It is out, isn't it?
Yes, I believe
Yeah,
so.
yeah, cool. Yeah, I did the update earlier, so yeah, that must be it.
So yeah, you
Um,
should be able to take advantage of notes right now. I haven't gotten to try them for myself yet, and I am taking a look to see. So there is also a full blog post that has like a little bit more detail about some of these features, and it does say here that it comes with rich text formatting, the ability to paste images, multiple notes per game, and can even be used in offline mode. These notes are saved per game and are synced across to any other PCs or Steam Decks you are logged into. They're also accessible outside the in game overlay on the game details page. So it doesn't
okay.
say
That's fine, we'll work it out.
you know what? It does say here, you know what? We've also added the ability to pin windows from the overlay so they can appear on top of the game while in game. The opacity of these windows is adjustable, and only contents of the window will be pinned, excluding the title bar and other extraneous UI. This new functionality is available for notes, guides, discussions, achievements, and the web browser. Yeah, so it doesn't say whether it'll track from device to device, but
Mhm.
it is cool that I didn't realize. I thought the opacity thing was limited to notes. So it is
No, no,
cool that you can
everything,
actually do
yeah.
that with the guide and everything like that. I could see that being a huge thing, right? When you're trying to do, you're like maybe stuck trying to get an achievement or something like
Mhm.
that. Or you're trying to solve a puzzle.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
like
Same, yeah.
normally you're pulling it up on your phone, you're pausing, you're doing, I love the idea of being able to just like literally follow along with this thing that you're
Yeah.
struggling with.
I also wonder if, or I well, sorry, I've just completely, lost my train of thought there. I like the idea of the images, because I'm the kind of person who will take a screenshot and then, "Oh, this looks odd." I won't look it up, I'll take a screenshot, and when I find out what this is for, I can go back to it later. And I'm doing that a lot on Tears of the Kingdom, where I'm taking a screenshot, but then I have to open up the album, scroll through my screenshots, find the one I want. So being able to just pop that in a note is really handy. I wonder how easy that is, and how, like, from Steam Deck specifically, or also how easy it might be from a controller on the PC, because I do a lot of my gaming on PC, on my bed, TV in front of me, controller in hand. If there's an easy way for me to just, like, hit the overlay button and navigate that in that way, that would be really great. But I do wonder if that's going to be very much like a sit down at your PC type thing.
Based on the I don't know, I think based on the video here, I could see it kind of going both ways. I think there's certain some of these menus I would probably want a keyboard handy for, like again, like the
Hmm.
notes, right? Like, yeah, you could use the in-game keyboard for that, but I could see that being a little cumbersome.
Hmm.
That said, I think like at least on Steam Deck, considering you have the touch screen, I could see a lot of this being very easy to do.
Oh yeah, the Steam Deck I think is going to be fine because you can just you probably click on the notes thing and it brings up the keyboard for you straight away. You tap it in here,
Hmm.
enter, and you're good to go. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'm worried a little bit about controller
I
support. But
think
hey,
I think
we'll
in
see, won't
terms
we?
of pulling up the screens, I think you could probably do it with a controller. I'm
Yeah, I'm
more
pretty sure you can just hit the Xbox button, for example, and that is an
yeah, and then just
absolute
navigate it like anything else. I
yeah.
think the thing would be if you are going to really take advantage of the Notes app, you might want to have a Bluetooth keyboard connected,
Yeah,
which is
which I do have one, so that's not too big an issue.
yeah, so you could just have it across the room with you, while you're kind of in that
Mhm.
mode, so that if you want to take advantage of notes or you want to pull up a guide or something, just to make that part of the process a little bit easier, right? Like I have a like $20 or $30 um, you know, Bluetooth USB keyboard and mouse that I bought specifically for when I use my dock in my living room in the
Yeah,
event I want to pull something up or play a PC game like that.
yeah.
So I think yeah, it probably won't be seamless with controller, but I think it'll be probably no different than navigating a keyboard or anything on a console with a controller, right?
Yes, yeah, I think, yeah, hopefully, yeah, if it brings up a menu, great, I'm happy to sort of input that way because, you get used to that, you can do it quite quickly.
Sure.
What I would love, I don't know if it's in it or because it doesn't specifically state it, I don't think, but I would love if I could bring up the notes on my phone in the Steam app, edit the notes in there, and then have them update on the thing, so I can still, like,
That
use my phone to input them,
that should
but
work.
then bing,
Yeah.
they pop up on the because it does say anywhere you can access the game, right? So would I have to be able to
Yeah.
play Hollow Knight on the system for me to be able to access the notes for it? Because if I could
Well,
access the notes
no,
for it on my phone, that'd be great.
I don't think so because it does say that notes can be. I'm pretty sure it says that they can be. This is interesting because it does say it lets you jot down notes about the game you're currently playing. So I would
Yeah.
imagine, but when you think about how Steam works, right? Like it knows what you're playing regardless of what device you're on.
Yeah.
So I don't see why not. I don't see why you couldn't pull up the Notes app on mobile while you're playing on PC and type them in there. Like that should work.
That's how I'd like I think because it also means that it's as quick as taking it out on my phone, but it also means I don't have to then dive back into my phone every time I wanna look at the note. I can just look at it at the top right-hand corner and keep track of it that way. So, yeah, I mean, these are things I'll have to test, but, yeah, we haven't had a lot of time between this coming out and us recording this to be able to test some of these things, so or have we?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
been when
Well,
did
not
did
no,
this
not
come out?
really. I mean, it only dropped like a day or two ago as
Oh,
of this
okay, so there has
recording.
been
So
some time. I've been very busy. I had a lot of sleep to get in.
yeah, I mean, I'm busy preparing for Steve to go on vacation. So, but yeah, we'll have to get in and play with some of these features before next week, and then we can report back on how they've impacted our play.
Mhm.
But one of the things they called out in the pinning feature as well was that like um for the multitasking maniacs who love to have a movie on in the background while they game.
Yeah.
I think that's hilarious, the idea of using it for picture in picture, and you've got, like, Netflix rolling up in the upper left corner while
It
you're
just
taking out, achievements or whatever.
the whole we've spoke before about having, like, a TV game or a gaming TV, where
Yeah.
there's just something in the background you're in handheld, but to be able to have, like, Seinfeld running over the top of a game while I'm playing it, maybe at, like, 50% opacity so you can still see or transparency, they're the same
Yeah,
thing. Depends
yeah, that's
if
what
you're a
you'd wanna
pessimist
do,
or an
right?
optimist. Yeah, you'd wanna just be, like, seeing straight through Jerry's head into the world of Elden Ring.
Truly the ultimate digital media experience. But yeah, I mean, I think that to me definitely feels like the biggest update that they've made in terms of, just like overall Steam functionality.
Yes.
But they did also talk about how, and this is back to Valve's words specifically from their video, kind of detailing everything. They say the technical work in this update makes for a better experience across all of Steam. It also enables hardware acceleration for Apple and Linux versions of Steam, excuse me, making everything faster and more responsive. So this is another interesting one, right? Because obviously, we've talked a lot about SteamOS 3.5 and having like the proper desktop launcher version of SteamOS, kind of making Linux a much more attractive and viable option for like the
Mhm.
general PC audience, which I think is very interesting. But then also the Apple support, that kind of ties back to the Apple event that we talked about on the Flip Screen Games podcast a couple of weeks back, where they revealed their new headset and they had Kojima at the event as well, and he talked about how he was part of kind of an announcement from Apple where they were saying that they had released this new, I forget the name of it, but they released this new like porting platform that makes it easier to get games running on Mac OS. So again, right, like seeing significant updates to Steam that do support Mac, hopefully is representative of that push and making, people who are Mac users have
Mhm.
maybe the option to use that as their gaming PC moving forward, right?
Maybe Whoopi Goldberg will get her dream of Diablo 4 on Mac sooner than we'd think. That's the quickest turnaround. She says she wants it, and then a few days later, Apple go, "Oh, yeah, we're doing an easy porting solution." Perfect. Yeah, I do think that it is, like, it's odd how few games are on Mac, and I understand why people don't wanna put the effort into it, but, Macs are quite powerful when you sort of get up into the higher end ones. So to not really be able to use that for gaming properly is seems like a bit of a waste, and there are people who will have a Mac for work who then have to buy a PC or own a PC
Absolutely.
to game on. And I think, yeah, unifying that's a great thing. Whether people take advantage of it, because I don't know if the gaming user base is really there. But again, that's Apple's fault as much as it is the developers just not developing it for no reason.
Sure.
Um, I think
Well,
there's a lot of go on, go on.
I think the interesting thing about that is if Valve comes through with proper support for Apple, I think that's a real game
Oh,
changer
yeah.
because one of the things we talked about in the episode that Steve and I did about the Apple presentation was like it's all well and good that they want to make a push for piece for gaming, and I think they should, but there is that conversation of like, well, if I have to buy Mac versions of software, like, am I splitting my library then? Like, if I'm already a PC player, am I really going to start playing on Mac? Probably not, right? But
Mhm,
if Steam support comes through and a larger number of games get, and maybe it is people taking advantage of Apple's new porting process, or maybe it is like something like Proton that's creating like an accessibility layer and just
mhm,
making games that don't natively run on Apple work on Apple. Any of those things could be a real game changer because then in the scenario that you just talked about, where maybe I own and like Steve's a great example of this, right? Like he owns a Mac that he uses for work, but that's why he wasn't into PC gaming until he got a Steam Deck, right? Is that his platform didn't support it. Whereas, if you are that person where maybe you already play games, but you just don't play on PC, and then your Mac becomes a viable option,
mhm.
maybe you consider it. Or if you were that person who had a PC library because they use it for gaming, but primarily uses a Mac for work or whatever else, and then all of a sudden your Steam library becomes usable, then maybe you become a full Mac convert, right? And then
Yeah,
you don't have a PC in your lineup anymore.
yeah.
Um, I don't know, and or right, you stop using Windows and you start using SteamOS with Linux, and
Yeah, that's
that's
good
the other way
also a
you
good
go.
option.
You could dual boot, who knows? A lot of
I think a lo
options there.
I think before we move on to the statement at the end here, I think it's important to mention that a lot of this may seem like a normal update for, like, some, some other platform owners, it might not be a huge update that deserves an entire sort of introduction on a podcast. However, I do think there is a lot of stuff in here that's not for us and it is for them, and they talk a lot about how they've, like, unifying the platforms and that, a lot of the stuff means that they can make changes on the fly. They can make changes to the, Steam, to to Steam that then can act on the mobile, can also act on the Steam Deck and also on Steam OS wherever it is. I think that's quite big in that instead of these being 3 separate platforms that all, talk to the same thing, they're now the same platform that
Right.
functions similarly across all things. I think that's big, and I think that's gonna be great when, like, when we see StemOS appearing on other things, and we don't have to wait for similar to Android, we don't have to wait for, um Valve to release an update and then the developers of that system to release an update. It's just there's one update and it functions on everything because they built it to work that way. Sort of like when Google releases a version of Android and then Samsung are like, we've got it now, so we're just gonna tinker out that before we release our Samsung version, and then sort of people are a bit left behind. Now everyone can sort of get the updates because it's one platform that should work in theory everywhere at once. Sorry, my eyes are burning. I think
No, you're good,
when I
bud.
washed my face before the podcast, I think I just flushed sun cream directly into my eyes, so
See, because I
that's,
just thought you were getting so emotional because of like the
I am
the
getting
the
that.
realization of Valve's vision here, right?
Oh,
Like
you've unified us all, Steam. You Gaben's done it again.
oh, it's funny, right? Because last week we talked about the Steam Machine, right? And like
Mhm,
the idea of like what could a Steam Machine that comes back in the era of the Steam Deck look like? And I think this kind of development is exactly what they've been working towards for years, right? Is like how do we bring the Steam experience and however you use it, right? Whether you're using it on PC, whether you're on Steam Deck, whether you're using the mobile app as a companion thing, or maybe playing some mobile games there. Or if you're using big picture mode, right? Like they want that to be as seamless an
mhm.
experience as possible. And that, like, I think ideally they want to work towards a future where you, the Steam player, have a device that accesses Steam everywhere, right? Or
Yep,
you have however many of that subsection of connections that works for you in the way that you play, right? Maybe you have a Steam Deck, maybe you have your standard gaming rig in your office, but then you've got like a little mini PC that you use like a Steam box or
Mhm.
like a Steam machine rather, in that living room or something like that. I could see you can see that vision getting clearer and clearer where they don't need to support multiple devices and multiple SKUs. They have multiple devices and multiple SKUs that just run their OS
Yep.
and work off of the framework that they've developed, and whatever ecosystem you're a part of, like you can be a part of the Steam ecosystem. I
Yep.
think that's the vision. That's the goal.
I do think that's a little bit, uh and when I said it earlier, it still was a little bit, like, optimistic about, like, things being that simple because there are gonna be when the new Steam Deck comes out in a few years or whatever, and then they've got to support multiple versions of hardware and blah, 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 blah. I think there will be some segmentation, but I think in an ideal world, you're right, that's how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That seems to be what they're implying, right? Which
Mhm.
is that, like, in that opening statement, they say we rebuilt the Steam client on a brand new framework that makes it easier and faster for us to ship features across all those SKUs we just said. So I don't think, to your point, I don't think it's like seamless where everyone is just identical, but it seems like it's getting closer and closer to that. So it's
Yes, yeah.
easier for them to have parity between all of those
A step
devices
in
and
the right
platforms.
direction.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And actually, I want to pull a question from the question block. This one comes from Shidifu, who wrote in a follow up to last week's show on the topic about Steam machines and said, "Thanks for another episode, team. Read the Steam machine. Do you think there is demand for a budget machine, essentially a Steam Deck without battery or screen, add Ethernet and HDMI out, with basic wireless controller included?" Which would compete with Apple TV, etc. I imagine it'd need some Android emulation or compatibility layer to give access to popular media apps. I mean, I think that there is potentially a market for that Shidifu, and I think that that's kind of what I see them working towards. Not maybe that device specifically, but again, like creating a universe where the market for Valve's Steam ecosystem is not limited to quote unquote PC gamers, right? And I think the Steam Deck is part of that. Well, while we talk all about the fact that the Steam Deck is a portable PC, if you don't want to use it that way, it doesn't have to be, right? Like it does offer a almost like Android like experience, right? Where if you
Mhm.
just want to use the native out of the box setup and use it like a handheld gaming device, it works that way. But if you want to be one of the people that does use it like the portable PC that it is, yeah, you jump in desktop mode and there's a ton of other options available to you and things you can get in there and tinker with and use it in unique creative ways. But that said, there's a reason that it has an out of the box experience for the average user. And there's a reason that they're now selling it in markets like Japan and Korea, where PC gaming has not had the same level of success and entrenchment that it's seen in the United States, right? And other parts of the West. And like it's being sold in general electronics stores, right? And a lot of people are probably going and grabbing it as a standard handheld that just happens to access the Steam marketplace, which is an
Yeah.
extremely attractive ecosystem to be a part of because it has great sales and games come there first.
Yeah.
So
And just cloud saves, things like that are all just great boons.
yeah, and it's all free,
Yeah.
right? Like, you're not paying for online in the way you are on the other platform holders. So the idea that there is no market, right? Or that there's not even a significant market of people that want to have that same out of the box type experience that you get with Steam Deck, but not in a handheld device as a living room set top box device. Which, like, as you said, Shitty Foo, right? Like something like Apple TV, but also is a gaming device, also has access to the Steam store. I think there's absolutely a market for that. And I think that long term, they'd be silly to not make a play for that again, because they've proven that their unique approach to software and like having a open source platform where they're very very active in the community and constantly looking for feedback on what should come next. I think the idea of a set top box that has maybe power parity with the Steam Deck, but maybe is a little bit less expensive because it doesn't have to have parts like a screen and and the touchpads and all that stuff. Yeah, I really do think that could find a market. I absolutely do. And I think the idea of a universe where you have your Steam market, or sorry, not marketplace, your Steam library, and whether I'm here at my desk, whether I'm on the go with my Steam Deck, or whether I'm chilling in my living room, on my big 4K OLED TV, right? Like I'm accessing the Steam
Bragging.
marketplace.
That's a nice brag.
Well, I got a QLED. I'm sorry. Steve has the OLED. I got the QLED because
It's nearly
second
as
class.
good. It's nearly as good.
I got a lot of
L
light. I got a lot of natural
LCD.
light.
I'm a common man. LCD. You guys know what I'm talking
Look
about.
at this guy. Look at this guy. But you know what I mean? I do. I think the idea that this and moves like this, getting to the point where they can just roll out updates to Steam and wherever you want to access it, however you want to access it, there's a device for you. I think I think that should be their goal
I
because
th
aside from Xbox, I think they're the company best poised to do the play anywhere, anytime, however you want thing.
yeah. I think Valve might be a little bit wary because there have been products like that that haven't done as well. Like PlayStation TV, for example, didn't do very well. I'm not sure how much Apple TV actually does or how well it does in the gaming space. And I know that people have talked a lot about Nintendo doing the same thing, but I do I do wonder if Valve just thinks, okay, cool. If people want to do that, there is a product for that, and it's the Steam Deck and the dock,
Sure.
or whether that because it's a market that's proven itself to not be that lucrative. Unless you do sell it as more of a streaming box that can play some games, but then you're limiting yourself um, by what it can play. I think in that respect. But hey, it's a new era. People probably were the PS Vita failed. The Switch was successful. Maybe people just weren't ready for it then, and now they're ready for it because there is more of an ecosystem and there is more of an obvious selling point because now Steam has the Steam
Yeah.
Deck and they've gone, look, now these two things do the same thing. Let's add a third thing in. So yeah, it could work now. I just think that Valve might also be like, well, that space hasn't really been massive.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and I mean, like, obviously, handhelds are, right? They're having
yeah.
a moment right now. But I don't know, it's interesting because, like, you say that, and I definitely hear where you're coming from, but I also wonder, like, what does the metric for success have to be? Because, like, the Steam Deck isn't as successful as the Nintendo Switch, but it's not a failure, right? Like,
True.
it's just it has a different aim. It's not trying to be the biggest, most mass market device.
Hmm.
It's trying to speak intimately to a niche audience that vibes with it. And I wonder if there's not a similar availability for them to,
No, it's
you
true.
know,
The
apply that
Steam
to
Link.
SteamOS 3.5 on desktop
Yeah.
and on some kind of set top television based device.
I
And
think
then you
this.
have a play for every market.
I think the Steam Link is another example of a similar sort of box that didn't quite do how well they thought. I remember getting like a Steam Link for like 20 quid at one point because they were like, we just need to get rid of these. This didn't do
Yeah,
well
yeah.
at all. And I understand that you need a full PC for that, and it's not quite the same thing, but I do think they might look back on we did this less than 10 years ago and it didn't play out for us. But maybe having the power in the system is more of a benefit then.
Yeah, and like when you think back on the Steam machine, I think of that as an idea way before its time. And also
Mhm.
like the fact that it was reliant on partnerships with other like it's the Alienware one, it's the this one, it's the that one. It's like
Yeah.
I'm just buying a pre-made PC. That's not what we're looking
Yeah,
for.
yeah.
You want it to be the Steam Deck experience of it's one device and it's games are verified on it or they're not.
Yeah.
And like you have a simple, understandable system
Yeah.
that people can buy into.
Well, I wonder if adding a smaller well, then no, because if it's the same if you're making power parity with the Steam Deck, then yeah, maybe that would work actually. In my head, this is like a weaker version, but actually it doesn't need to be, does it
No,
necessarily?
I think
It
I
could
think you
still
could
be
probably have power parity and maybe even a little more powerful. And if it comes with a controller, I think price probably comes out somewhat in the wash, right? Because it's like you're saving
Mhm.
money on not having a screen, you're saving money on not having the touchpads, you're not spending any money on the casing, like the custom casing of a Steam Deck, all the buttons, everything like that, right? You're talking about a box
Mhm.
and a new Steam controller, right? Which is something they said they're thinking about anyway, right? Not that
Good.
it's imminent, but that it's already that would be a product that had value beyond the box, right? You could
Yeah.
use that with your Steam Deck, you could use it on PC gaming. If it's a good controller, that's a successful product in its own right. So
Mhm.
say that controller's like 70, $80, I feel like price parity would not be that difficult. And you could
Yeah.
have it as an alternative or as a companion.
I'm okay with this. You've convinced me.
Could be good.
I'm fair. I'll say that.
So that's Valve's own next question. Max, that I want to pose to you. They closed off their video saying, "As always, we love to hear from you. So please let us know what you want to see next."
In terms of
And I'll extend this to the listeners as well, right? What do you want to see next from Steam's like service level updates, or just like the platform itself, right? Like, where else can we go from here? What other functionality can we bring to Steam, that like we the user would really find valuable, because clearly Valve is listening.
I personally would like my profile uh to be more almost more like a social media in that when I share screenshots and things like that, they don't just go to like a mystery space that I can go and look at it myself, so I have to share it. Like I would like Max has played this. Here's some screenshots from his recent time. You know, if I've shared them, or have me able to comment on things and reply to things, have people comment and reply to things like this. I think it's what it is now is quite plain, and I only really use it to get to my wish list sometimes because it's one place I know where it always is. It's always in there, click wish list. But I think
Sure.
having it be more like a profile of here's who I am, here's the games I play, and here's the games I've been playing recently. Here's the Max played this for this long. He took these screenshots. Have it be more like a journey of me as a gamer in a similar way that like I use GG app, um, which is a website I use to like track the games I've played.
Hmm.
I just sort of have a visual way. It might be nice to be like, oh, in the similar to how we do at the end of the year. Oh, this month Max played this, 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 and this. He played this many hours of this. Or when it knows I've beaten a game, for example, I got like the achievement that is like beat the main story, for example. Max beat these games. He's played these games. He's currently playing these games because I played it within the last month or whatever. That would be good, I think, to have my profile be more about me as someone who plays games, whereas mine is now just like, here's my picture, here's how long I've used Steam for, and then here's a load of comments from some people who I haven't spoke to in years, or people who I just know from like playing games with, who've just left comments in
Sure.
the last like 10 years. It's odd. It's an odd space, and I think that where they're spending more time on having custom um, animations, having custom backgrounds, having custom avatars, all this sort of stuff, having that be useful because I wanna get in there and I wanna see what people are doing and I wanna, "Oh, add me on Steam." You'll see all that I've played or, follow me on Steam, for example, and you'll be if you like the games I play, here's the games that I've played, the games that I like. Here's lists of games that I've made that I think that you'd like if you like these kind of games. They do it with the store, but put that the, in the profile. But yeah. What about you?
I like that. I could definitely see that, because I think one of the big things for me is like Steam, just like for a long time has felt old. Like it doesn't get a lot of fresh coats of paint like this. So seeing them come in and kind of like make some small tweaks just to having the overall experience feel a little snappier and a little fresher, I think those are really really good changes. Because
Mhm.
like I think by and large, Steam has a lot of the broad functionality I'm looking for. I think like in terms of what are like features I really want to see, it's stuff we've talked about in the past. I think in the same way that they have did that kind of like community controller layout support, I would love to see that functionality expand. I think having that for like game settings would be really huge, right? Where like you could go through, like, especially with Steam Deck, right? Like being able to be like, "Oh, this game uh maybe isn't deck verified yet, or maybe like the base version is like, like it's safe, right? Like it's locked at 30 FPS, this or that." Steve always talks about how, the little tweaking, right? If you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of graphical fidelity for more performance, you can easily eke out 40 FPS on a lot of these
Yeah.
games. And that does make a pretty big difference to be locked at 40 rather than 30. So like I would love to have more of those types of experiences be kind of baked in the way that controller support is, because it's so easy when you jump in a new game to just go and see like what's the most popular community
Yeah,
layout,
yeah.
and what, like, how many hours have they used it, what are the changes they made, what are the goals of it, things like that. I
So
love that
that's
functionality.
you're talking like if they have Proton DB sort of baked into it in a way
Yeah.
where you go on there and you see these people, like these are the people they've played it most recently. They've played this many hours and they've this is how they got the best performance out of it. But have like
Hmm.
presets that are here's my preset, and I got this, this, and this from it, and the battery life was this long, and you can sort of choose, do I want more battery life, more power, or better frame rate? So better visuals, better frame rate. You just click that, and someone has done a preset of the system for you. That's a good
Yeah,
idea. I like
and
that.
I think it would be really cool if you could have it like almost be like the way that like Adobe Premiere or something like that works when you make a preset and then you just save it, like, it would be
Mhm.
awesome if when I went into my game, right, in the drop down menu of, like, do I want ultra high, whatever, right? Like, a lot of people are adding, like, a Steam Deck mode. It would be cool if you could have a little subfolder of, like, these are the custom ones that you added in, right?
Yeah,
So, like and imagine how much easier that would make, like, taking full advantage of the dock, right? Where it could be like, I have 2 presets for every game that I play. This is the Steam Deck preset. This is the docked preset. And you could just go in and like have them saved in the back end that way. Like something like that, I think would be really cool. And maybe actually having it be in game rather than being like a menu layer like the controller stuff is too big of an ask, but that's fine. Like I love the experience of being able to just jump in and try a bunch of folks controller layouts because like the user community being so dedicated to optimizing experiences and teaching people how to do stuff is such a big part of why the Steam Deck is as cool and unique and successful as it is. So I think like baking as much of that stuff into the native experience of Steam as you can is not only like cool for us as Steam Deck users, but for anybody playing on any device, right? Like it would be really nice, to demystify that a little bit for the more casual user that we talked about that does like, yeah, I want to play on Steam Deck, I want to play PC, but like I don't know what shaders I need to play with to get the best 40 FPS version of it. And I don't want to
yeah,
learn, right? Like, and I don't think that person should be punished for that, right? Because like there are obviously tons of great resources where you can go and find this stuff, right? Like us being one of them. We're making tutorials for this stuff left and right. And like that's great. But, it's also a thing that like can create barriers between folks who could be playing on Steam and aren't, right? Because they just don't want homework. They want to just sit down and
yeah.
play.
And I do
And
think that there is a lot of homework in the Steam Deck if you wanna use it to its fullest potential. Like, even
yeah,
something as simple as setting up, EmuDeck requires homework, and I think we're the kind of people who would do that, but there are people who are put off by that because it's like, "Oh, it's still PC gaming at its heart. It's still tinker and play around with."
right.
But yeah, like you said, to have, like, just big buttons that say, "When you boot the game, I wanna play this with the best frame rate." Bang, I click that when I boot the game, and all of a sudden, this preset for me, whether it's by the developers or whether it's by a user who has tweaked it for the to sort of the best settings. I think the user's probably for the best. And then you're then free if you want to go further tweak, you can, but to have that pre-built in for you, I think is a great, great shout.
Yeah, I think that would just go such a long way. And I think that the controller system is such a good example of how to do it right. And I think
Yes,
just
yeah.
like take that same mentality and apply it to every feature that exists
Yeah,
on the device, frankly. I
yeah.
think
It's as
that's the way to go.
the controller community controllers is such a setup, sorry, layouts, whatever. It's such a hugely underrated feature, I think. And I think it's people don't necessarily when they're talking about the big features of the Steam Deck or when they talk about the benefits of the Steam Deck, that was something I just found by accident. It wasn't like it was sold to me in that way. I was just like, "Oh, cool, I'm trying to play this game that came out on the PC in 2002, and they didn't support controllers. It's
Right?
never been updated to support controllers." But all of a sudden, I have a full keyboard and mouse transferred into controller setup. I just press a button and I'm good to go. And I'm like, that was so easy. I could play like Legacy of Kain or Psychonauts very easily without doing any work because I just pressed that. And that's such a huge part of the Steam Deck system. It's made games more playable for me, and I think that's what's great about the Steam Deck.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so we've got a couple more stories and questions to talk about for you on the back half of the show. But before that, let me remind you that this episode of the Steam Deck podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of June. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Asobi, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/splitscreengames. You're all the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Speaking of which, this is going to be my last plug for all the extra stuff that we did last week for Summer Game Fest. If you have not checked it out already, we dropped a couple extra episodes of the Flip Screen Games podcast and talked about it over on Nintendo Noise as well, and kind of covered all of the announcements and angles of Summer Game Fest. So if you want to go hear our thoughts on some of the games we were most excited to see from stuff like the PC Game Showcase, the Wholesome Direct, all that kind of stuff, go check it out. We have a bunch of good content over there, and I hope you'll give it a listen. If you want to go and show your support just like those Patreon producers did, if you want to write into the question block just like some folks did today, right? We already pulled out that question from Sheedy Foo. Guess what? Hit us up, excuse me, over at flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all that and much more. And however you choose to get involved, show your support, or write into the show, we thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast. So we got an update on a story that's been kind of getting kicked around on this side of the fence for a couple weeks here, right? Months now, I guess. The Last of Us Part 1 is now officially Steam Deck verified, thanks to a brand new update. Naughty Dog and Iron Galaxy have released a new update that is called V1.1.0. And alongside that update was when we got the official Steam Deck verification there. So allegedly, the game should run now. And as soon as this news broke, and it also comes with updates for regular PC, right? CPU and GPU performance have been improved, textures, lightings, all the crashing issues, all the stuff that was very problematic on either version of the game has seemingly been addressed. Whether they've been totally fixed or not remains to be seen. But we had Stevie Yaki over in the Discord who wrote in and said, I would like to know if anyone has tried The Last of Us and what it's like with the new patch. And of course, our own Steve replied and said, I tried it pre-patch and it was a disaster. Re-downloading the game now. And Steve is, of course, away this week on vacation, but I am going to make sure that he boots up the game and gives it a shot for
I
you all this week so he can talk about it next week. So we'll have an idea of how it performs on Steam Deck at that point.
I may even still have it installed, so I might give it a go. Because yeah, I was with Steve when it first came out. We tried to cover it; it just wasn't coverable, really. I think I can't believe we're still talking about it, but I am glad that we're talking about it in a positive light now. I would like to try it out. I have also been pausing the patches on my PC for the better part of like 2 months or wherever it came out. And all of last week, I was like, "Why is my PC? Why is my internet so slow?" And it's because I've just accidentally turned on my PC and Steam's doing a 70 gigabyte patch for The Last of Us. So maybe I'll actually let that finish and I'll give that a go, and we can talk about it next week with Steve.
Yeah, I would love to hear I would love to hear how y'all are getting on with it because I really wanted to pick it up on Steam Deck, and both my wife and I were eager to play the game. I want to play it again. She'd be playing it for the first time, and we were kind of in the mood for it after the show, right? As
Yeah.
many were, and now that it's finally had some time to ruminate and get to where it probably should have been at launch, and by probably I mean definitely.
Mhm.
Uh, I would love to see it be good and be actually
Yes.
playable there now because I think it will be a really fun game to revisit on the Steam Deck.
Yeah, it's a shame they've missed some of that show hype, really, isn't it, with
Yeah.
that? So
The nice thing is though, right? Of course, there's always going to be a season 2. So the game will have its moment, who's to say? Maybe that's me being overly optimistic, but that was something we talked about at the time where I was like, I think unfortunately, it's a thing that a lot of publishers take advantage of, but I think the PC market is pretty forgiving, right? When a game comes out and
yes.
it sucks and then it gets fixed, like it can go on to have a second life in a way
Yeah.
that is not always the case on console, right? Like a lot
Yeah,
of
'cause
games
something
kind
else
of
has come along.
yeah, right? You have your moment and that's that. Whereas like with Steam, I think with PC in general, I think people are more open to playing older games when they get to them and like
Yeah.
taking advantage of the new hardware and oh, I'm getting the best experience and it was on sale and I picked it up for $10 on the Steam sale or something like that.
Yeah,
Season
exactly.
2 will come around and people will get excited for it again, I think. But we'll see. But yeah, I'm definitely interested in hearing more from the two of you to see if we end up thinking does it pass the smell test now? I think that's the question.
I'd like to find out myself.
So we got a couple more questions in the question block here. This first one comes from Ronnie Hot Dogs, who wrote in over on the Discord and said, would love to hear your opinion on my quandary. Is it morally okay to play Tears of the Kingdom through on Yuzu on deck if I buy a physical copy of the game? I don't own a Switch, got Yuzu and the Tears of the Kingdom ROM to see what the fuss was about, and got hooked. Didn't happen with Breath of the Wild, just not as engaged. Just not as engaged for whatever reason. Now, many hours in and feel some sort of guilt for not buying this amazing game, but I don't want to shell out on a Switch just to play. No idea where I'd be legally, as I'd own a license for the game, but also an interesting angle. Thanks and keep up the great content.
I think legally it doesn't matter because, like, who's gonna find out? But I think if you are enjoying the game and, like you say, you feel guilty for not paying for it or giving money for it and you want to support Nintendo, I think, yeah, buying a copy of the game would be, it's just one way for your enjoyment of the game to count towards a sale. You don't have to buy a Switch for it. If you like the game and Nintendo will see that you're enjoying the game, um, it's just one extra sale. You don't have to. I mean, I fine with people not buying games if they want to emulate them because they don't have the hardware. I do think that sometimes it is just like wasted plastic in your house, but I feel like also if you're really enjoying the game and you want to support Nintendo, you want to support the game, then yeah, buy a copy by all means.
Yeah, I think at the very least, I think that's the right thing to do. I think we've talked a lot about emulation on this show, and I'm generally of the opinion that I don't think there's anything wrong with emulation. I think
Mhm.
emulation is really important to video game preservation, and there are so many games that are only accessible through emulators. Um, so that's kind of generally speaking the party line from me when emulators come up. That said, I think you enter a pretty morally gray area when you start emulating things that you could be paying for, right? Like, I think it's way different to be like, I want to play, like for example, I talked about how early on the Steam Deck's life cycle, one of the first games I was very excited to go back and replay was Tony Hawk's Underground, right? Which is a game that, right now, if I wanted to play, I own a copy of it. I own a PS2, but if I was going to play it on you know, the only way I'd be able to play it would be able to buy an adapter and hook it up to my television and, go through that whole song and dance and play with the scaling and try to get it to look as good as I can and yada, 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 right? I think if the only way for you to legally engage with a game is to jump through that many hoops, and that's as somebody who already owns all of those things I just said. If
Mhm.
you, a person who was maybe born a decade after the PS2 was relevant or something like that, wants to go back and play that classic. How do you do that? You don't. There's not a good legal, easy way for you to go and do that. So I think at that point, it's a way different conversation than, well, I want to play Tears of the Kingdom to see what all the fuss is about, but I don't feel like spending the money on the hardware or the software. To me, that's where you cross the line into it's stealing. And if you feel morally okay with that, then that's your decision to make, right? But I don't think there's any argument to be made that it's anything other than piracy at that point. And people who try to moralize it or act like they're playing Robin Hood or whatever, right? Is like I think you're kidding yourself. I think you're trying to justify the fact that what you're doing is stealing rather than just
Yeah.
being like I'm stealing and I don't have a problem with it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think in the situation you found yourself in, Ronnie, I think buying a copy of the game is definitely the morally correct thing to do. I would probably say, yeah, you probably should have bought a Switch and played it there, but you're already this far in, right? Like the idea that you're going to buy a piece of hardware that you're not going to use and just keep playing it on your Steam Deck. I get where you're coming from at that point, right? And I think to Max's point, I feel like that's at the point where like, yeah, like maybe you should have, maybe hindsight on that is in retrospect, that would have been the quote unquote morally correct thing to do, right? The ethical thing to do. But I think as long as you're going through the trouble of like wanting to make right because you like the game and you want to shell out for it, I think you're doing your due diligence there. I think that's good enough
Yeah.
by my morality barometer.
But you do what
So
sits right for you as well.
yeah, absolutely. But you asked for our advice, so that's what we think. So, next question here, and this is where we're going to close it out for the day. This one comes from Slim Timmy, who's wrote in over on the Discord, a newer listener who wrote in and said, "Would like to know when the new tutorial video on Emulation Dream Machine is coming out. Also, as a newcomer, how do I look at all the plugins and what are some of the must-have plugins?" So on the emulator Dream Machine video, I'm hoping to have that out in the next 2 weeks. I definitely want to get it done in June. I have a couple other things going on personally that are kind of vying for my attention. But to give you kind of a breakdown, if you're not a member of the Discord, I bought a CRT that is the exact CRT I had when I was a little boy in my bedroom, and I bought all the stuff I need to connect my Steam Deck to it, and basically set up a station where you can play all of your retro games on the native, screen resolution, get that nice classic CRT look to it, but all from your Steam Deck, right? So that if you don't have the money or you don't have a collection of retro consoles like I do that you can also natively hang up, hook up to the TV and all that good stuff, you can kind of emulate that experience without having to have nearly as much investment in retro hardware that you'll then have to maintain, right? Because everybody wants to enjoy retro gaming, but retro gaming as like a collection hobby has gotten really hot. So a lot of old games are really expensive. They're not accessible. They're not available on modern platforms. Or even if they are, you're not able to play them in the original way that they are intended, right? With that CRT goodness, and not having the kind of blocky pixel edges that we think of being what pixel art looks like. But if you were around at the time, that really wasn't the look, right? So I kind of wanted to create a little tutorial for how you can kind of emulate that for yourself. So I'm going to be tinkering with that for the next week or two, and then I'll just have to actually get the video put together. So keep it tuned for that one, Slim Timmy. But we'll definitely have an update on it sooner than later. Because I got all the gear set up. I have all the stuff I need now. I just gotta shoot the B-roll and do the dang
Yeah.
thing. So definitely takes quite a bit to shoot one of those bigger videos like that. So appreciate that you're excited for it though. In terms of plugins, I think that is an interesting one because I think what are like the must-have plugins is going to be related to like what you want to do on the deck more than like there being a couple that are like you must get this one, right?
Yeah, I think some of the major ones have been sort of folded into Steam now. I can't remember
Sure.
specifically off the top of my head. There are a couple that are just now a part of Steam OS natively. I think there's a good video Steve did on GameCube emulation and Power Tools, where he explains how to get the Power Tools installed, which then allows you to install other plugins. I think he also in that video mentions a few of the plugins that are good. Um, I think Steve is probably the guy to tell you what, because I had a few on there, and I don't know how many of them are still, even sort of
I know a lot
working
of the a
or
lot of
if
the ones that you and I took advantage of early on are now like just baked in. So
yeah, yeah, or even, like, maybe just don't work anymore, but there's I think I like a lot of the, CSS stuff, so I like having the Steam homepage look more like the Switch homepage, the icons are centered, I like having more icons in my library, so instead of it being 4 across, it's 5 across, and you can sort of get more in there. I like taking away some of the shine, there's just little bits and, I if you get Power Tools installed through the way that Steve explained, it's very, very simple, you just use EmuDeck to do all the hard work for you, basically. You can then quite easily go into the plugin library and just have like a little flick through and see what there is. A lot of them are pretty self-explanatory. There's a couple that maybe aren't, but I think anything that relates to making it look how you want or function how you want are all good. But I think there are some that maybe um, are a bit more confusing. So things like the VPN one that Steve worked on, it doesn't have much of a use for me. Some of the music ones, for example, never going to use. But even some of the general themes, I'm not really going to use. But like, having just like control over a few more bits in the CSS and the design, I think are very handy. So yeah, you can just have a scroll through, maybe even sort of look what people are using on Reddit, for example, or yeah,
one
seeing what works for you.
one I would definitely call out because I know it's one that Steve uses a lot is the Proton DB. And
Yes,
that
yes,
one basically like lets you know what the Proton rating is of the game, so you'll have an idea of how it runs on Steam Deck. And basically, the reason that that's worth having is because like we talked about the Steam Deck verified system earlier, right? And like it's not great because there are a lot of games that are deck verified that have problems, right? And don't necessarily run perfectly. And then there are a lot of games that are not deck verified that run great and have no
yeah,
problems. Multiversus is an example of like I talked about it earlier. The entirety of the time I was playing it on Steam Deck, it was not Steam Deck verified, but it ran perfectly, you know?
yep. And
So
also it acts as a shortcut. You just hit the badge, the ProtonDB bash, and it takes you straight to the page, so you can very quickly see, okay, I need to change these settings or run it in this version of Proton, change this mode or whatever. So that, yeah, that's a key one for me. I've turned off my Steam Deck doesn't even tell me if games are verified anymore because I've turned it off. I don't need to know that. I'd rather
Yeah,
know what ProtonDB says.
I think ProtonDB is a must. That's probably an essential one. I would
Yeah.
think. I think one that's really cool. I don't actually have it installed, but it was like exciting when they revealed it. I never got around to installing it. Is the How Long to Beat plugin? That's really cool. That's a like I think whenever I'm considering a new game, that's a thing I often will go and check. Is like generally what is the how long does it take people to get through this, and you try to figure out like where does it fit on your calendar, right? Like if you're kind of waiting for the next big release and maybe you got time for an indie game on a weekend, right? You want to go check that out. I think that's a really useful one. So I think that's one I would consider for sure. But I also know, Slim Timmy, you are going back and listening to the archive of episodes, I believe. I believe you said that in the Discord. And we've talked about a lot of plugins over, the year and almost year, I guess, we've done the podcast. So yeah, there's definitely plenty of episodes where we've kind of gone in more depth on some of those. But I think Proton DB is the only one I can think of that really feels like you must have this one. And then I think I would do a little bit of research in terms of like what are you most interested in achieving, and then come back to us with that. And Steve can probably help point you know and a couple other directions that that we haven't thought of. But I feel like those are the ones that I find most useful. Because like a great example is like Vibrant, right? Like Vibrant Deck was one that a
Yes.
lot of people used, but that's got native support now. So it's like
Yeah,
you
and I think
don't
it's better now than Vibrant Deck ever was as well. So,
yeah.
yeah, I can't think of any more that have been folded in. Maybe the music controls that have been folded in now and being able to listen to your Steam music,
Well,
but
and I guess like you said, Power Tools. Power Tools is
yeah.
probably the other one that you'd want to consider because that opens the door for you to get into kind of everything else.
Yeah, yeah. It also just makes emulation easier. Like there's just a lot of things that you can do with Power Tools. Yeah.
Definitely a good one. But we'll let Steve weigh in on this one as well when he comes back, and we'll see if he has any
Yes.
other answers that we haven't thought of. But thank you all for writing in here on another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast. Remember, if you want to write in with your questions, comments, or concerns, you can hit us up at flipscreen.games. We've got our Discord, we've got our email address. Both are great ways to get in touch. But of course, our Discord is the best place, I think, for you to come and be a member of the community, keep the conversation rolling between episodes, and maybe even write in and suggest a topic, right? We've gotten a ton of topics from the Discord in the last couple of weeks, like the Steam Machine talk from last week and all kinds of stuff. So if you want to go and be a part of that conversation with a bunch of other Steam Deck heads like yourself, make sure you go and join us over there. Flipscreen.games is the link where you can find links to all the places we are all over the web. So however you choose to get involved or show your support, that's the best place for you to go. And we thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Max. Wait, he's been Max. There we go.
I'm
We'll
always
see you
somewhere.
next week.
Bye-bye.